Hi, this is Teresa at Highland Blueberry Farm, and today we're going to talk about St. John's wort. St. John's wort, this beautiful yellow five-petaled flower. We're going to talk about how to make medicine out of it, why we would want to make medicine, what it's good for, and we're going to get into that. So, let's do it. The things we want to remember before we harvest our St. John's wort is you don't want to harvest anything that's close to the road. You want to stay far back away from the roads or highways. And if you see the St. John's wort growing in a field and it's not your property, be sure to stop and ask if it's okay if you go into their field and harvest some St. John's wort. But you also want to ask them if it's been sprayed, because you do want organic medicine. So I happen to have St. John's wort growing all around my blueberry farm, so I'm pretty fortunate, and I know what it looks like when it's starting to come up in the spring. So I really make sure that it grows in my garden. As you can see right here, this is at the head of my garden, and so I have St. John's wort growing in my garden with my lavender. I got my broccoli, my kale, I've got cauliflower, I've got all kinds of stuff going on, peppers, but I also want my St. John's wort here. It also attracts the bees. I love having pollinators. One of my main goals here on the blueberry farm was to build up the native pollinating plants that grow naturally on our farm without bringing in plants. And I wanted to create a pollinator's habitat. So that I can feed all of the native pollinators that are all around my farm. I want to be able to provide food for them. I have about 20 acres of wild Maine blueberries. And so I want to keep them here. I want to keep them close so that they will pollinate my blueberries in the spring when the blueberries start to bloom. But I want to feed them through the rest of their life cycle. And so I make sure that I've got meadowsweet growing and vetch growing, and I've got the black-eyed Susans, and I've got my Rosa rugosa, and I've got St. John's wort, right? I've got St. John's wort growing up here. So St. John's wort, and I've got some of these, I can't remember the name of it right now. It'll come to me in a minute. But I've got vetch climbing on my St. John's wort as well. The bumbles love it. I've got lavender that's growing here, that's native to Maine. Of course, I have I have raspberries and blackberries, and I have all kinds of other things that are going to feed the pollinators through their life cycle. That is honeybees, bumblebees, but my digger bees, my mason bees, yep, even some of the wasps. They are also considered pollinators, even though we look at them as, you know, when we get stung by them, we don't like being stung by honeybees or bumblebees or wasps or hornets or anything like that, but they can be useful. So you have to kind of give them their space and, you know, recognize what God created them for. So let's talk about the St. John's wort. St. John's wort, you're going to pick the flowers. This is what you want to really concentrate on. You want to not harvest. I wouldn't go and harvest all the flowers here because I want to make sure that more are going to grow again next year. So I'm going to pick a good portion. The roots are going to make sure that they come back next year, but seeds also. So that's pretty important. So I'm going to hit as much as I can here, and then I'm going to move on to another area. And I'm going to fill up my basket. And that basket is going to fill up my jar. So if you wanted to really make sure that you had St. John's wort, you weren't quite sure by identifying the yellow petaled flower. Again, there's 5 petals on the back side. I don't know if you can see that, but on the back side of that petal, there's kind of like some lines right on the back side. And so, and you can even see them on the front, but you can see them more prominently on the back. You've got a tuft right here in the center, little tuft. This is where the bees would collect the pollen. And the nectar, I believe there's nectar on this one. I'm not sure. Don't quote me. But if I have a new bud, like right here, a new bud, I would roll that between my fingers. And as I roll that, there's going to be like this purple red stain that will come from the buds. And that's how I know that I have the St. John's wort. So that's what I'm going to be picking. I'll pick just the top. If you see how much, it's probably about 2-3 inches. So I'm going to be collecting 2 to 3 inches of the top, kind of just pulling it off, putting it in my basket. And again, I'm being selective. I'm not going to take it all. If I get some leaves in there, some stems, it's not going to hurt anything. Again, I'm taking the flowers. You don't have to squish the flowers, the petals, but I'm going to harvest those, fill up my basket with about half, and then I'm going to take and move on from here. It's a beautiful day and the birds are singing. It's a great day to be outside. In Maine, it's been about over a month, I think, without any real substantial sunshine, a lot of rain up here. So people struggle with seasonal the seasonal affective disorder. If I don't get sun, I can get a little sad. And St. John's wort happens to be very, very good for that condition. St. John's wort is also very good for pain, neck pain, back pain. It's great for depression. There are some precautions, and we'll talk about that. Once I get a fair amount of the buds, more of it will keep budding. I don't have to take all the flowers or all the buds because I want it to come back, right? Save some for the bees. They like it too. My grandson usually joins me and helps me out, but right now he's napping. Oh, and look at that bumble. I love the bumbles. Bumbles will work harder than honeybees, but there's a lot of honeybees that will work because there's more workforce, where the bumbles are kind of solitary, but they'll work rain or shine. They love my lavender. I get pretty excited about that. All right, I think I'm gonna move on. So here I'm over in another spot, gonna harvest some more of these beautiful tops. We're taking just the flowers and the buds, leaving plenty to ensure a good harvest for next year. And don't worry if your fingers become all purple and stained. Don't worry about that. It all washes off. It's pretty cool. So just keep moving around and hitting from spot to spot, and that way you'll have plenty. So I've got a pretty good size basket full. I don't want to get any more than I need. I know that when I harvest these flowers, one of the things that you want to look for is you really want to look for not the seed, not the flower turning to seed, but the flower and new buds. That's what you kind of want to go for. If you get some of the flowering seeds in there, it's not going to hurt anything. It's all part of the plant. But I only want to harvest what I'm going to be able to put into my quart jar. And what I use for medicine, how I gauge how much I make, is I really want to think about like, how much did I use last year? Did I use a quart jar, a pint jar, an 8-ounce jar, and then make that and maybe a little bit more? So I made a quart jar, went through almost all of it. So I'm going to do 2 quart jars this year so that I will have this medicine through till next harvest, next July. And you know, they say that St. John's wort blooms on June 24. But it didn't bloom on June 24th here in Maine. It was actually in July. So I'm gonna harvest a little bit more just so that I can fill those 2 quart jars. And then we're gonna go take our harvest inside, and then we'll show you how to make a tincture out of it. So we're back in. We've got the flowers in our basket, and so you want to get a clean jar, right? Make sure that it's clean, sterile. And when you go to pack your jar, we don't even need to cut this up, because you're really just getting the flower tops, the flower buds. But I'm going to press this down in gently. I'm not going to press it hard, but I do want to have about 2/3 of a jar full of plant medicine before I put my 100 proof vodka on. So that looks pretty good. Got my jar 2/3 full. It's packed slightly, not heavy pack. And let's get the other jar. Here we go. Got the second jar. Gonna pack it. I like the wide mouth jars better than the narrow mouth, but right now that's all I have on hand that are clean, and so we're going to go for that. Now, some people will say, oh, what about the bugs? So what about the bugs? Bugs are in our environment. There's good bugs, beneficial bugs, and then there's some not so kind bugs, and then there's some not so good bugs. If you're worried about bugs in your plant medicine, first of all, the alcohol is going to kill them and sanitize them. I promise you. 100 proof will do it every time. However, if you're like, I can't do bugs, then let me suggest get a screen. Take your flowers, set it out on your screen for about 15 minutes outside in the shade. Don't put it in the sun. For about 15-20 minutes. And I promise you, every bug that is on your newly harvested flowers will know its environment has changed, and it will leave. It will go find somewhere else to live. So you can always do that. I'm going to finish filling up this jar. Put a little bit more in here. There we go. So now we've got both our jars filled, and remember, always label. Make sure you've got, I just use a Staples return label, and on the label I'm going to write down St. John's wort tincture. I got my St. John's from my blueberry farm. The date that I got it, I used 100 proof vodka. That's what I'm going to write on the label. I'm going to put it on either the jar, or I'm going to put it on the lid, whichever you decide what works best for you. I'm going to put cool dark 6 to 8 weeks, and then I'm going to put the date that I need to check it. If you happen to let your jar sit for 2 months or 6 months, as long as it's sitting in the alcohol and the alcohol covers all the way to the top and there's no head space, there's no air, oxygenation going on in the plant matter, you're good to go. Just watch and make sure that the plants aren't sticking up above the alcohol, because that's where you're going to get potential for mold. So you want to make sure all your plant matter is down. And when we go to incorporate this, so that we make sure that there's no air bubbles trapped inside the jar after we pour the alcohol on, I use a wooden chopstick. And I label it, and then I'm going to put it in a cool dark. So let me get some of that stuff together, and then we'll get back and we'll talk a little bit about what this medicine is for. I always pray over my medicine, my spirits. Lord Jesus, I just want to ask you to bless this medicine that you gave us, Lord, to cleanse and purify this alcohol that I'm pouring over the medicine, over the plants. Lord, I ask that you would just use it. Help me to use it for good, and that it will bless those around me. In Jesus' name, amen. Some of you already know my grandson. Here's the chopstick, and we're pressing down just to make sure all the air is out. And you'll even notice where I have already poured the alcohol is beginning to change colors. It's starting to turn that red, which is a telltale sign of St. John's wort, is that beautiful reddish purple color. So here we go. So we're gonna just keep doing that, and we'll be back. Okay, so let's talk St. John's wort. Now that we have our tinctures made, and just so you can you see that red color that is in the tincture? This is only after about not even a half an hour, and it's going to get darker. So this is actually, you're going to see it start to change color almost right away. This has been about 2 hours since we poured the alcohol on top of our fresh plant matter. And you're going to start to see that red color. This is what comes from the, what makes this red color is the Hypericum perforatum. Hypericum perforatum. This is what gives us the red color that you'll find from St. John's wort. Okay, so what I did is, after it sat for a couple hours, and I shook it up and down, made sure all the air was out, and then I went back and I topped off the top of it with more alcohol, so I have no air space, which will not cause any oxidation within the jar. So that's what we want. And now I'm going to put this in a cool, dark place. I have the perfect spot for it down in my basement. It stays about 50 degrees down there. And so I will put it down there in my basement, and it will sit for 6 to 8 weeks. And then I can bring it up and strain it, and then I'll have medicine for until next year. So why are we harvesting St. John's wort? There's a lot of good purposes for using the St. John's wort. We can use it for pain relief, inside and out. So if you made a oil from this St. John's, you would put it into your oil, which I like to use avocado oil. Sometimes olive oil will go rancid on you, so I like the avocado oil. or just some sort of good medium for your skin. Some people like to use almond oil. Some people like to use grapeseed oil. And then other people like to use olive oil. So it really is what you prefer. So you're going to go for an oil. You put your St. John's wort into it. Again, the same thing. You're going to put about 2/3, not stuffed in there, of plant matter. Put the oil over it. Get all the air out of it. Make sure it's topped off. And then you'd put that oil in your cool, dark space for 6 to 8 weeks. You don't want to put it in the heat because some bad things can happen if it's in the heat. You've got people who do it all the time. I used to do it kind of initially when I first started making plant medicines and plant oils. But I didn't want to take any chances, right? And so this just assures that no bad bacteria starts to grow inside of my jars. So when we put the plant matter in there with the tincture, for the tincture, we're going to use the 100 proof vodka. Again, 50% water, 50% alcohol. I'm extracting all the water soluble properties as well as all the alcohol properties. This is not, you don't want to use 190 proof. It's 190 proof isn't good for you anyways. And we're not going for pharmaceutical medicines. We're just trying to draw out the properties from St. John's so that we can use that. So St. John's wort is good for pain relief inside and out. For people with HSV or HPV, herpes type viruses, colds, flu, we could use our St. John's tincture for that. It stops an outbreak of a viral load and lessens severity that do occur. Great for shingles. So if you're someone who's prone to shingles, say you had chicken pox and now you find yourself getting shingles. Personally, I wouldn't, once you've had chicken pox, you shouldn't even be getting the shingles shot anyways, because it's not going to do any good. In fact, I think it does more harm. But sometimes people are prone to shingles. And so taking the St. John's wort tincture as well as the oil on an outbreak for the shingles will help to lessen the viral load of that. This is also good for sore muscles if you're using it as the oil. I have had neuropathy. My neuropathy is getting better with my feet because I used to have a diabetes. I'm now off the medication and my numbers are good, but I've got damage done to my feet. And so St. John's wort oil was really helpful in the early stages of my neuropathy. It helped to lessen the pain that I had on my feet. It's also good for lifting the mood. So anybody who struggles with SAD, the seasonal affective disorder, otherwise known as SAD, it's also good for lifting your mood, depression, right? We don't want to use this if you are on a pharmaceutical depression medicine. Please don't use St. John's wort. Make sure you talk with your doctor about all of this. If you're treating yourself, this is really important that you really understand your own body. Talk and work with a naturopath. Once you know your body and once you've worked with plant medicines and you're not on pharmaceuticals, then it's much easier to use the plant medicines. Do not use, this is very important, do not use with any Xanax, Klonopin, like seizure medicines. You understand, you want to look for the warnings and the precautions, and you want to make sure that you know what you're doing with all plant matter, right? All plant medicines. Some people worry that the fresh tincture plant matter will make you photosensitive. It will not if you're using fresh. If you're using dry plant matter, it will. So those are things that you want to keep in mind. When we use fresh plant matter, what we're doing is we're making sure that we get the whole plant with all of its constituents. We're not trying to dry it out and then it loses the value of the fresh plant. And so we want to use the fresh plant when we're making tinctures. When the plant matter is dry, the chemical constitution has changed and not all of its properties are in the dry plant. So that's why we want fresh. And also the caution, I think I mentioned it once already, do not harvest the ornamental St. John's wort. So that's pretty important. But other than that, you've got a jar now. We're going to wait 6 to 8 weeks. We'll come back. We'll squeeze all the goodness out of it. Throw away the plant matter. I've got my labels, right? Remember, I told you to make sure that you have your labels. And so I wrote on here St. John's wort. And I wrote on here cold dark and the dates. So today is 7/19 and 6 to 8 weeks. August 30th to September 13th is when I'm going to be decanting this and then adding this to my collection of medicines that I will be able to take or share with people who are who are using plant medicines already, right? So anyways, that's it. We've got it. You can do this. You so can do this. All of you, all of us can do this. God made this possible for us. He said the plants would be your medicine, the fruit would be your food. So let's look into what God gave us. Jesus wants us to be healthy. He wants us to be able to use the things that he created for us, for our bodies, for the things that we need. And so you can do it if I can do it. And why can I do it? I had a business where I was making medicinal teas, looking into for over 20 years. I worked with plants. I worked in my blueberry field. I harvested the blueberry leaves because they were higher in anthocyanins or antioxidants than the blueberry fruit. We'll get into all of that another time. But today it was all about St. John's wort. I hope you try it. I hope you have some at your place. And let me know if you did. I'd love to hear how it went. And remember, don't leave any airspace at the top. You want to make sure that you have a full jar. So when I tip it upside down, I see no air bubble, no airspace, right? That's the important thing. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. I enjoyed having you along while I was making all of this plant medicine and harvesting it out in my garden and out in my fields. I enjoyed having you along. I hope this was informative for you. I hope that you believe in yourself. I hope that you'll try this and you'll do this and you'll start asking questions and asking Jesus, what do you have for me? Anyways, it was great seeing, well, I didn't see you. It was great having you along. Take care until next time, and we'll see what we harvest next and what medicines we make and what we'll do. Have a great day, everybody.